There have been many videos about what motorcycle you should get as your first motorcycle. I'm making this video because I think that it is absolutely ridiculous that someone might get a beginner motorcycle and then die on it a few months later because they went into a corner too fast. Many people will tell you that you need a certain kind of motorcycle and that it will take you a long time to become skilled on it. I do not agree with that. If you watch this video, I will show you that anyone who is able to fit on a 1000cc motorcycle will be good enough to ride one in 2 weeks. You can go from never seeing a motorcycle to 2 weeks later being able to ride a 1000cc motorcycle down the highway through a corner at 150 while it's raining. Now, most people will argue that's not possible, but most people will also tell you that if you don't get a 250cc motorcycle as your first motorcycle, you'll die. So, first things first, that's obviously not true. You can get a 600, a 1000, or a 1300 as your first bike and be totally fine. A lot of people will tell you otherwise, and it is my job to give you all the proper tips and all the proper information for making sure that you just get whatever bike you want and have fun on it. I would also like to say that even if you don't want to try to get close to 200 or whatever your top speed is, this is probably a good video to watch because it will make you more skilled at lower speeds. So, the 250cc motorcycle is supposedly good. Why should you skip it? Why should you skip a 600 and go straight to 1000 or 1300? Well, if you want the fastest bike you can get, you should probably get a 1000. They're faster than 600s, and they're almost as fast as a 1300, but they don't weigh as much as a 1300. So they're basically your best bet. But let's go over some of the complaints with getting a bike like that. If you're new to motorcycles, you might have looked up a few videos or articles or talked to some people. Let's go over what some of them had to say. Alright, so what are some of the reasons against getting a 1000cc or 600? Well, they say not to even think about it, and these bikes don't tolerate mistakes, which really doesn't mean anything. If you start just paying attention to, just in general, if you pay attention to basic reasoning, people like to use really powerful, really general statements, and they'll say something like humans are not perfect, all humans make mistakes. So, since these bikes don't tolerate mistakes and you do make mistakes, you cannot ride one. Except anyone who does ride one is human. So, if someone can ride a bike like this for years and not crash, you don't need to be worried. Well, I'm not gonna use the throttle that much. I'm gonna be careful with it. This person says that the engine response is very different, so the bike won't behave like you think it will. Like it won't be as predictable as you think it will. And their next reason is that the throttle is twitchy. And like if you hit a bump, or like I've heard this before and it's absolutely stupid. They say that you won't be ready for something and that your hand is always on the throttle. If you hit a bump or if you sneeze, you'll accidentally hit the throttle. And then since you hit the throttle, you'll accelerate a lot when you're not expecting it. And you'll fly off the highway or you'll hit someone in front of you. And this is absolutely ridiculous. I'll go ahead and say that I have had this problem. I put air in my tires, so they were behaving a bit differently. I was carrying groceries, so I leaned out to the side a little too much, and I hit the throttle by accident. I went from going like 15 miles per hour to 18 miles per hour, and I did not hit anyone or anything like that. It was a basic increase in acceleration. It was not a crazy accident causing bike flying across the street kind of thing. This is a ridiculous reason. And in order to actually do what they're saying, you have to lean over and then absolutely twist the throttle as much as you can and hold it there. And that's coming from someone who's done like 150. You can't get to that speed faster than I can if I'm at full torque and I'm holding the throttle. But people act like you can because you sneezed or something. It's ridiculous. Next reason, they don't like to change direction because of the suspension. Look, all I need to know is that bikes are fast, but what they don't have is absolutely, completely just, people imagine that you can put a bike wherever you want, however you want, and you can't. It's not impossible to use or anywhere close, but it's not as nimble as people think at high speed or low speed. You can change where you're going mid-corner, unlike what this person says. And something that I really wanted to mention as they talk about in reason 3 is that gravel is not a big deal. You can go over no problem. Gravel, sand, rocks, whatever. And if you actually ride a bike and you know how to ride a bike, you can avoid it even if you want to. But that was something I wanted to mention because you can just go over gravel or rocks, no problem. A lot of the people who wreck or whatever because of that, wreck because they're scared. They see the rocks or the whatever, and then they hit their brakes or they steer off the road or something. So they wreck because it's not even because of the gravel on the road, they're just afraid of it. I've gone over gravel and rocks on my bike. I actually went over a rock on my bike and I felt it under my tire. I felt where it was in the position. I thought that was pretty cool. But I did not go off the road. Nothing bad happened. I just went over it. Because if you hold the throttle, that'll change how the bike behaves a lot. quick rule: do not brake, do not accelerate, just hold the throttle where it is. That's when the bike is at its best. What's the next reason? Reason 4, the brakes are really strong. Alright. I'll go into this later, I guess, but modern motorcycle design is very bad. It is not cutting edge, amazing performance machine stuff. It is very bad. The fact that the bike can flip itself over because of the brakes is not because it's got powerful brakes, it's because it's got a bad braking system. Just to let you know, like a Toyota Corolla or something like that can stop from 60 miles per hour completely in like 140 feet. So you get a random person, put them in one of those, have them just press the brake pedal as hard as they can. They stop at 140 feet. If you get one of the best bikes you can get, and one of the best riders you can get, you gotta balance the front and back brake and their weight and their position. And from 60 miles per hour, I might take them like 120 feet. It's not that much better. And if you want to talk about cars that are really fast, a Lexus LFA, a Ferrari, a Corvette, they can stop from 60 miles per hour in like 90 feet. So, just in case you were thinking that the basic reasoning of a motorcycle is lighter than a car will stop better, it's not true. I'm not sure it ever has been, but it's definitely not true now. Keep that in mind when a Z06 shows up on you on the highway. A new motorcyclist does not know what he's doing. Insurance on the back. I personally don't care about insurance that much. It says that full coverage on a 06 600 is $1,800 a year. Well, my insurance for my bike was going to be like $400 and something a month for full coverage, so I did not get full coverage. There's no reason to. For that price per month, you can buy another bike, so don't even bother with getting full coverage. Unless you're, I can't see a reason why you would. Even if you're absolutely rich, there's still not a reason to get full coverage. Especially when, if you really need that coverage, insurance companies might just cancel your policy or find a way to get out of it. You can get an H2 practically for $400 a month. So, yeah, any bike that is top of the line should be avoided. That's not true. Next reason, my friend started on a 600 and he's still alive. It's just one of those things that happens when someone tries to convince you of something by saying that you have a good reason, but your reason is still incorrect. But then they don't listen to anything else you had to say. So it makes perfect sense that your friend started on a 600 or a later bike, but he's just surviving. He's not good. And you don't want to ride a bike just to survive, you want to ride it and become good. So don't get one. Well, obviously, if your friend is surviving on a bike, it can just take some extra time and become better. But according to this guy, if he's been riding for like 8 years, He's only been surviving and he's never become good. Alright, what's the next reason? I don't care about having a pretty bike or a cool bike. So none of that matters to me. I literally don't care what anyone else rides, whether it's a cruiser or a 250. I got my bike because I wanted something fast. It's not about anything else. Next reason is, if you have self-control, you won't crash. Yeah, and they're doing the same thing here. Oh well, you got a good point there. If you got self-control, you won't crash. But what about everything else? What about the other people? Even if you're perfect, someone else can hit you because they're on their phone, and you can't control that. This is ridiculous because no one thinks you're perfect. No one thinks you know how to ride like an expert, but they'll say that so that no matter what you do or what you say, the best you can do is become perfect. And there's still problems outside of that best. Like even the best rider can't control someone on their phone. So the reality of this is actually being perfect involves being good on your bike and analyzing the environment, which you get that skill from just being on the road. There's nothing to do with bikes. You can get that skill from driving a 18-wheeler. You gotta watch the people and what they're doing, predict traffic flows and all that. I don't ride a cruiser or anything, so I don't really know anything about a 1000cc V-twin or any of that. My experience is with an inline-4. I don't want to sell my first bike in a year. I mean, this is true, but you don't need to worry about it really. I mean, if you want to get a 250 for your first bike, go ahead. The only way you really need to worry about losing money on it is if you buy like the best, or not the best, but like the most expensive 250 or 300 you can get, and that'll be like $5,000. And then you put some modifications into that, and then you decide to actually ride that around and get good on it. But then like you decide to wait because maybe a new bike comes out next year, but then your bike gets hit by someone, and then it's totaled and it becomes worthless. So at that point you have a want for a faster bike, and you have the skill for a faster bike because you've been training yourself on your 300, but you're out like $8,000 because someone hit your bike. And it's not really likely, but you've got to keep in mind that your skill is worth something. There's no strict dollar amount that you can put on it, but it is worth something. So even if that exact thing happened, I personally wouldn't be worried about it because your skill, if you really did get that good on it, your skill is worth a lot of money. And in the grand scheme of things, you're getting a 1000cc bike that's going to cost maybe $15,000 or $30,000. So even if you did sell your bike for $8,000, which is never really going to happen, it's still not going to cover your new bike. It would help, but you still got a lot more money to put into it. Alright, the next reason is I'm big or whatever. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to worry about this really. It's true, but it's a very, very, very unimportant thing. If you're actually, I mean, what they say here is true. If you're like 400 pounds, then you need to consider a bigger bike, but at the same time, bikes are just built a certain way. So if you're actually 400 pounds, bikes aren't really built for you. They're not built to fit someone who's that heavy. I mean, maybe you're uncomfortable on it, but you're just gonna get used to the fact that it's not really built for you. A Hayabusa might fit you better than a 250, but you don't need to be worried about that, like 50 or whatever pounds you got. Because someone who's 160 on a 250 won't have that much of a different time than someone who's like 220. Someone who's 220 doesn't need to go straight up to 1,000 or 1,300 or whatever. Next reason is I drive a fast car, so I can handle a motorcycle. This kind of says that's stupid, but it's actually a very good point. I would love to know what this guy has to say about learning about braking points and apexes and all of that. I mean, a steering wheel is way different than handlebars, but if I had to train someone who had race car skill versus no skill whatsoever, I'd pick the race car person any time. So last thing is wannabe riders wanting to hear something. Yeah, people with more experience, and yeah, so that's all the reasons that they have. I've heard some other ones. None of them are good. You can very easily you can start on whatever bike you want. You can start on a 600, 1000, or 1300. The only thing you really need to consider is, do you fit on the bike, and how heavy is the bike? I mean, if you get a 600-pound cruiser, it might be a perfect example of a racetrack rider, but when it comes down to low speed, it's going to be a question of how much do you lift in the gym, because moving that thing around is not going to be fun for you, because those things are heavy. I mean, I've dropped my bike once, and I've never crashed, and I've been riding for a few months. I put like 6,500 miles on my bike. But I mean, no matter how good I was, it was a question of, do I lift weights? And I don't lift weights anymore. So when my dad told me to put my bike somewhere that I shouldn't have put it, I kind of had to listen to him, and what I thought would happen did happen. The bike was way too upright, so when I walked up to it, it was automatically just tipping over, and it just fell straight over. I knew I shouldn't have put my bike there, but he thought he knew what he was talking about. But he also thought he knew what he was talking about when he told me not to get one, because it had so much power. And when I fly off at 130 miles per hour, that's not going to be good. But just in case you're not aware, I've never flown off my bike at 130 or at any other speed. I've done 130, but that's another story for another day. Right now, we're going to work on you getting the knowledge for having a bike like that. So some people think you should not start on a 600 or 1000 or 1300. I think you can start on whatever bike you want. But why do people think that? There has to be something. Those reasons we looked at they're not much. Well, there are 3 reasons basically why people think you should not get a bike like that. Because you'll end up like this person. You won't know what you're doing. you'll hit the throttle fully, and then you'll just go off into something. You'll hit a telephone pole, you'll hit a car, you'll hit whatever. This is a very, very easy to avoid mistake. What people don't like to tell you after they send you a link to someone flying into a car is that these people who do this have typically like no experience, like literally 0 seconds of experience on a motorcycle. It's very easy to avoid this problem. Just don't hit the throttle like that. Don't ever clutch drop. It's a simple rule. Do not give the bike a lot of throttle while it's in neutral or while you've got the clutch in, and then release it like that. It's simple. Well, what about the second reason? Well, the second thing is that you won't do what they just did, and you'll actually know how to handle the bike. But you'll end up hitting someone or hitting something because you're so focused on how fun it is and how fast you can go. You want to have the actual mentality that goes with having that power or hitting whatever speed. So that guy was doing like 80 miles per hour on the street. He got up to that speed just fine. He didn't hit anything, but he forgot that he was on the street where there are lots of cars, and the bike cannot either steer out of the way or brake in time if someone pulls out. And when you're at that speed, you can be way down the street and someone will pull out. And you'll go straight into them because you're going so fast. And an added problem with this is that someone might not see you at first, and then they might see you a few seconds later. So even though they could have just turned in front of you and kept going, they might stop and slow down because they're trying to look at you, and then you hit them. So that was the second reason. And the third one, I don't actually have a video for that one, but it's the idea of challenging yourself. You can't really challenge yourself with a Ford Fusion or a Forerunner or something. If you get good on a motorcycle, then you might want to get better and get better and become better than that. And that involves doing more dangerous stuff and doing more risky stuff, and even if you don't die after the first few months, or the months after that, or the first few years, you can still end up dead because 100 isn't that bad, and 150 isn't that bad, and then you get into 200, and somewhere along the way, you can just end up dead. I'm not too worried about that third reason because once you're at that point, you're at like expert riding level. And at that point, you know your limits and your bike's limits. So you can work with it. So that last reason is kind of impossible to avoid, but as an expert, you can keep yourself away from that, and you can keep yourself away from any eventual problems. Because as you can see from the MotoGP accidents, not that many people die from riding a motorcycle fast. Yeah, it is true that even expert riders make mistakes and they crash, but at the same time, they take calculated risks. So someone will tell you, well, even if you become perfect, even if you become better than MotoGP riders, you'll still have an accident and crash and die. But they don't mention how these guys just end up crashing and breaking their ankle, and then when their ankle's better, they're straight back out there. They just tell you that even they crash. But people aren't really interested in you becoming good rider. They just want you to not get a bike. And the people who do want you to get a bike don't want you to get a fast bike. But we're going to have to work on changing those people's minds, or I personally don't think we need to pay any attention to them whatsoever. You just need to pay attention to yourself and your bike. Now that we know why some people don't want you to get a large bike as your first bike, but what kind of bike do you want? Well, there are basically three options. You can get a lightweight, relatively powerful dirt bike, an older 1000cc bike, or an older 1300. If you want to do the things that you see in movies or TV shows, you probably want a dirt bike. Don't be afraid to choose a dirt bike because you think it's too slow or it doesn't look good enough. The reality is that those bikes are much more nimble and much more light than 1000cc bikes, so that makes them able to actually turn and handle like the bikes that you see in movies. So if you want to go driving through a mall, or just also have the ability to go off-road and go off-road at a pretty fast speed, you'd want a dirt bike. If you want to have a relatively high top speed and be able to maneuver okay at lower speeds, you would get 1000. They're not as good at handling at low speed as dirt bikes, but that remains true up to maybe 30 miles per hour. And after that, they start becoming even. If you don't care too much about lower speed handling, and you're all about acceleration and top speed, then you would want a 1300. Your best bet for getting a dirt bike is basically any of them, except for the lower class of dirt bikes. But even then, even though those aren't as powerful, they're that much lighter and that much easier to handle and easier to jump also. You don't want to try jumping a BMW GS. It has more power, but the landing on that would be terrible. When it comes to the 1000cc group, you do not want to get one of the newer 1000s. If you are thinking about getting a new BMW S1000 or a Honda CBR 1000, don't. These bikes are overpriced and they're not fast enough. What you need to do is find a lower mileage used bike, preferably one from the previous generation. I say this from experience. I decided to get what is basically the fastest bike I could find. I got a 2015 Yamaha R1. It cost $15,000. After riding it for a few months, I was tired of it and I wanted something faster. I talked to the people at my dealership on what I could do to it, and they gave me a very short list of options that were going to cost me around $10,000. And even if I spent all that, the bike still wouldn't be that much faster. What I should have done was get a bike from the previous generation that has a lot more parts available and a lot more research done. And then I should have just gotten that $6,000 worth of, or $6,000 to $10,000 worth of parts put on that bike. If I had done that to maybe a 2010 R1, it would be a lot faster than my brand new shiny 2015 R1. But now I'm stuck with that because no one felt like guiding me through this process. But the reason that you should get an older bike is because these newer bikes are mainly expensive because they are new and because they have electronics. The electronics are worthless, and unless you just are in love with the way the bike looks, you don't need a new bike. It's a much smarter idea to get a 7,000 or less bike in good condition and then put 10,000 into that bike. You'll want to get things like carbon fiber or magnesium rims for handling, better brake lines, power commander, maybe a turbocharger. I wanted one, but they didn't know how to do it to my bike. But they knew how to do it to the older ones, though. When it comes to the 1300s, pretty much anything will do. We'll probably be looking at just the Suzuki Hayabusa or the Kawasaki ZX-14. Just get one of those, turbocharge it, and that's the end of the story. The acceleration and the top speed on those will take down basically everything. My bike stock can do a 10-second quarter mile, and that's faster than an Audi R8, a Mercedes AMG, Charger Hellcat, or GTR. So you've basically got every single car that's fast beaten with my bike. And a turbocharged Hayabusa is going to be way faster than my bike will. It won't handle as well, but if you want acceleration and top speed, you're not worried about that. After you decide what type of bike you want, you should just look at a few manufacturers, and if you know about cars, you'll know the general rule. If it's American or Asian, it'll be cheaper and more reliable. If it's European, it's more likely to be expensive and less reliable. There are exceptions, but that's a good general rule. When it comes to dirt bikes, you'll have a few options. 1000s, you won't have many options, but you'll have a good set. And for 1300s, you don't have very much. So after you look for a bike, you could try to go to a dealership, but they're not going to have much more information. They're not going to let you test ride a bike since you're new and you don't have experience, and they're not going to be able to tell you that much in terms of making the bike faster. That is, if they have a bike you want and you want it to be faster. I am of the opinion that the best first bike is the cheapest version of the bike that you want. So if you want, I don't know, if you want some kind of Harley Davidson or something, you don't need to get a 250. You need to get a bike that has a similar weight and a similar type of power. And then you ride that around, get used to it, maybe sell it, and then you buy the actual Harley Davidson. If you want the fastest 1000 you can get, find a cheap one. Maybe you want a CBR 1000. Find the cheapest CBR 1000 you can. And then, after you're used to riding and your taste or your senses have developed, then you can figure out what you want more of and what you don't want more of. For example, you might be okay with the top speed, but want better acceleration. And you might think that it doesn't turn in well enough, so you get better tires. Something like that. Since everybody else thinks you shouldn't even be looking at a bike like this, dealerships won't really be able to help you, and you won't be able to get much help from anyone else. So, it's a good idea to just pick that cheaper bike and go for that and then buy one of those. Once you're used to that, you'll be able to fine tune your desires, I guess you can call it. Remember, you're looking for a bike that's ultimately not going to be too expensive. Like I was saying earlier, the bike itself won't be that expensive. It's the modifications that you do to it. So if you get a $3,000 or $5,000 used 1000 bike, you don't need to worry about trying to find the absolute best one or anything like that, because you're going to end up changing a lot of the stuff on the bike. Giving yourself a good starting point is nice, so finding one in good condition would help, but ultimately, you might end up turbocharging it, putting a power commander on it, changing the shocks, getting new rims, new tires, getting new body panels, everything. So, what about the actual riding? What are the tips that you need when it comes to actually getting onto the bike? Well, like I said, it's very simple. If you are going fast at low speed, you need to be in first gear. If you are going fast at higher speeds, you need to be at the lowest gear you can be in. My bike will do 0 to 100 in just first gear. So if I'm at basically any speed under 100, I should be in first gear. When I start to get to 90 or 95 or 100, I need to change to second gear. Second gear is used from 100 miles per hour to 120 miles per hour. So in those speeds, I need to be in second gear and stay there. I potentially might stay in second gear if I'm moving at 120, but I need to slow down a little, and then I drop to maybe 80 something, because at that point, downshifting isn't really useful, because I'm just going to change back into second a few moments later. When you are learning, it is not a bad idea to just stay in third gear. So instead of starting in first, going to second, going to third, and then going to fourth and fifth and sixth, just stay in third gear, because it will provide you with enough power to get good lean angles, but it will not be too overwhelming for you. And just in case you don't know, you would shift into sixth gear to get better mileage per gallon. You would be in first gear for performance and sixth gear for mileage per gallon, unless you are doing a top speed run, in which case you would go through every single gear that you have. You would stay in first gear until 100, second gear until 120, and so on. The next thing is keeping your body on the center of the bike. You will hear a lot about leaning off your bike and dragging knee, but you don't need to worry about that. You will be good enough to do that after 2 weeks, but you don't need to focus on it because it is confusing. Technically, being able to drag knee means that you're fast, but you can use improper body position to drag knee and not be fast. Some people think that if your knee touches the ground while you're on the bike, you're fast. This is not true. In order to avoid this, just focus on keeping yourself on the bike and leaning. And then, at some point, you'll be good enough to touch your foot peg to the ground while you're in a turn. And this means that you're able to get good lean and go fast. And if you actually get on a bike or look at pictures of one, you'll see that if the foot peg on your bike is touching the ground, you've got it leaned over extremely far. I did this after maybe, I think it was 2 months after I started. I didn't even do it on purpose. I just got so comfortable with the bike, and I was in first gear, and I just tried laning as much as I could through a turn because I had the perfect setup for it. And I actually scraped my boot between the ground and the foot peg, and I caught myself off guard because I knew that I'd been getting better, but I didn't know that I was good enough to do that. And then I realized that if my shoe or my boot was between the ground and my foot peg, I had the bike leaned over extremely far. And if I just moved my leg out just a little bit, then I would have been dragging the. So even though I did not think I was good enough to do that, I was. Don't worry about trying to lay off the bike. That's just going to make you do a bunch of exaggerated, pointless movements. At some point, you do need to start moving off the bike, but the thing is, you move in the opposite direction of what you would see typically. You need to be on the other side of the bike when it's being leaned over. So when you turn left and the bike leans over to the left, you need to be going a little bit over to the right side so you keep the weight of your body on top of the bike. This is good for two reasons. One, it reduces your profile in a turn, so you can lean the bike over more, while also having a smaller profile so that the bike or your body doesn't go over the line. This is something that I learned from riding on the street, because you don't have a gigantic racetrack like all these MotoGP stars do. You just got a 2-lane road. So if you're laning your bike fully, but your body, maybe even your head, is over the double solid yellows and a car comes by, then that headlight is going to take your head off. So if you do this, you can still lean the bike while keeping yourself in the lane. This is also a good tip because even if there is not a car coming, it'll help you get good at staying in one lane. And that's how you need to learn how to ride. Don't be one of the people who moves all over the road, goes over the double solid yellows. You need to practice one lane riding, whether you're commuting or you're trying to go fast. Simply because riding in one lane fast is more difficult, and it will make you a better rider. The second reason is it makes the suspension work better. When you are keeping your body off of the bike, the suspension isn't being weighted properly. But when you put yourself over the bike, you are putting more weight on the suspension, and the back wheel won't move around as much. That is basically all that you need. After you start riding your bike for a few days and you're used to it in third gear, you need to start getting used to it in second and then in first. since first gear is the best gear for cornering and acceleration. It might be too much for you, or it might not matter. Just know that even though power might frighten some people, power is what you need to stay safe. One of the reasons why I think electronics are useless is that the electronics on my bike limited the power. I listened to what everyone else told me. I assumed that more power was bad, and so I only used more power when I felt like I was ready for it. But it turned out that once I started using those higher power modes, I could not go back to the lower power modes because I didn't have enough. When you lean your bike, you need it to provide power because the power counteracts the weight of yourself and the bike. So even though I was just going to go get groceries, I would need to have the highest power mode because I was used to leaning the bike just a little bit. I wasn't even trying to go fast. Just making a right turn at a few miles per hour. You can tell the difference. Since you're starting out, you might not be okay with that, but I can tell you from experience, trying to act scared and trying to act cautious and not use that power is just hurting you. I unlocked the power on my bike really slowly, and I could not tell a difference between the lowest power mode and the highest one. It did not suddenly turn into this monstrous, uncontrollable motorcycle. It was just easier to ride. And I partially noticed that on the highway because I like to be in sixth gear for saving gas. But some of those turns on the highway, even though I wasn't going fast, I couldn't go through them in sixth gear because I couldn't lean my bike enough. I didn't have enough power. I would have to downshift. As I got better, I started figuring out how to go through those corners without downshifting, but even then, once I increased the power, I didn't have to worry about downshifting anymore. Speaking about electronics, ABS, traction control, you don't need any of that. Just remember that full throttling the bike is not okay unless you are leaned over and you are going in a straight line. You'll be able to find out what full throttling is if you just get on the bike and move the throttle forward and back without it even being on. And you'll get a much better idea of what that's like if you do that while the bike is on, but it is in neutral. It is possible to do this with it in first gear or second gear or whatever gear, but you have the clutch pulled in. I would advise that you do it with the bike in neutral though, so you don't have to worry about forgetting about the clutch and letting go of it accidentally, like the person in the video. But the electronics are sort of a talking point because some people argue that it makes it easier for beginners. Some people say it makes it easier for experts. Some people think you still don't need to go near 1,000, even if it does have all that. I can tell you that if you know how to ride like you should, the electronics will not make a single bit of difference, and you won't see a point in having them. Some people make the argument that electronics are useful because even MotoGP riders use them, but what people don't know is that MotoGP bikes are much, much different from regular bikes. So having those does not make MotoGP riders faster. It reduces stress. When you have to manage a bike like that and do 200 miles per hour over and over again, it becomes difficult to manage it properly every single time. So that tiny little bit of throttle that you give, that's too much. The electronics will handle it and they'll cancel that. And that'll stop you from going into a turn too fast. That being said, those electronics don't make them faster. The bikes still don't brake much better, and they still don't accelerate much faster. It's about keeping the rider as focused as they can. Those riders can easily ride those bikes without the electronics. They just don't, because they want every advantage they can get, because they want to win. I guess one of the main points in the electronics, well, the people who like electronics talk about ABS, but what they don't know is that ABS is not a good system. They think about it in terms of cars, and for cars, ABS is great, but for bikes, it's not. The one advantage you can get from ABS on a bike is not locking out the front tire. When it comes to stopping distances and brake fade, ABS does not matter. People who do not know anything about actual physics or actual braking systems just assume, well, ABS is electronic. Electronics are controlled by a computer. Computers are smarter than a person. So ABS is good. But what they don't know is that a skilled rider will brake better than an ABS system. A beginner rider won't, but a skilled one will, because there are too many variables in braking a motorcycle for a computer to handle. It's not like being in a car. So if you practice braking like you should, you will be better than the ABS system. That's a known fact. Most ABS systems are way too intrusive for actual fast riders to use, and they have to be minimized. So if you practice like you're supposed to, you'll be good at braking. And you won't need or want an ABS system because it'll mess with your braking. Trust me, if they made a computerized braking system that would stop my bike from 60 miles per hour in like 40 feet every single time, I would buy that system. I'd pay thousands of dollars for it, but they don't make anything like that. So if you want to be good on a bike, you have to learn how. You can't just sit back and hope the computer does it for you. Since we're on the subject of braking, I should mention the most important fact that you need to know when it comes to motorcycles. The brakes on motorcycles are terrible. Do not make a motorcycle with good brakes. Whether you go to Yamaha, BMW, or Ducati, they all have terrible brakes. A Chevy Silverado traveling at 60 miles per hour can stop completely in 140 feet. A Lexus LFA or a Z07 Corvette can stop from 60 miles per hour in maybe 90 feet or 95 feet. A BMW S1000 or a Ducati 1299 will take around 125 feet with the best rider. So even if you've got the best bike and you've got some of the most skilled people riding that bike, it's not going to brake very fast. A pickup truck can compete with you, and an actual fast car will be a lot better. I realize that this is probably the most easy to, it's just basically the reason people think motorcycles are dangerous. It's not because they're so fast, it's because they can't stop. It is true that motorcycles are a lot lighter than cars, but they still can't brake that well. A lot of people will tell you they can. Those people are wrong. If you think they're right, tell them to show you some braking distances and compare them between cars. This also goes for people who say that the brakes are so powerful, or the brakes, they'll stop you on a dime. They don't make a motorcycle that does that. And this is one of the reasons that you have to work on your braking. The brakes are terrible even in the best case scenario. So you've got to be absolutely perfect when it comes to using them. Because if you need them, you're going to have to act quickly. All that you can really find from the brakes when it comes to how powerful people say they are is the fact that you can lock up your front tire, and if you lock up your front tire, your bike will go down and you'll crash. It's kind of the same with the back tire, but a back tire getting locked isn't that bad. So you are just going to have to work on your low speed braking and then work your way up. One of the things that I did to become better was focus on using the back brake. The back brake is much, much weaker than the front brake, but it is still useful. You might hear some people saying that they don't use a back brake. Don't pay attention to those people. They're not actually fast, and that's not a good idea. I started using only my back brake and only using the front one just so that I could make myself remember that it was there and teach myself how useful it could be. And then I started doing that so that I would figure out the proper balance between the front and the back. And from that point, I knew how to use the most of the back brake that I could. And I started focusing on using the front brake more. So now that we've gone over a few things, let's try a little test. When you first get your bike, how should you treat it? Well, I'm going to be really careful. I'm going to start slow, and I'm going to make sure that I respect the bike. It demands my respect because it has so much power. Okay, well, how much horsepower does it have? Well, I looked up how much power it has online, and it's got one of the most powerful engines that you can get, pretty much. I know how much power it makes, and at what RPM. Riding is basically just going in a straight line or going through a corner. You're either doing one or the other. Which one is more difficult? Well, the bike that I want can do 212 miles per hour, so going a straight line is more difficult because you have to handle all that speed because the bike is so powerful. Right. If you had any kinds of answers like those for those questions, you are not even remotely qualified to start on a bike. Those are all typical bullshit answers that you get from people who want to start on a bike but can't. Going through corners is the most difficult part. Doing 200 miles per hour is really easy. And it's not even close to being difficult. A bunch of people can do 170, 190, 210 in a straight line, but they'll die doing a 50-mile-per-hour corner because they don't have skill. If you want to get fast, you go through corners that are very tight and very small. You don't try to do it by going as fast as you can. You try to do it by staying in the lane. Don't go over any of the lines. Stay in one lane. Do it at the regular speed limit and slowly increase. Work on going faster and faster. Not that much faster, just in like 3-mile-per-hour increments. Keep in mind, first gear is the best gear. When you're racing, you're probably just going to use 3 gears, first, second, and third. You might never touch third. When you're doing these, when you're just going somewhere and you're not focused on being fast, and keep in mind you're in third gear when you first start. If you're not comfortable staying in third gear, you won't have to worry about shifting, and it will give you enough power to get used to the bike, as well as enough power to actually corner, as well as okay mileage per gallon. You could stand first all day, but it'll be twitchy and it'll be jumpy. You might not be used to that. It'll make a lot of noise, and the mileage per gallon will be terrible. That's another thing to note. If you actually start racing, you're going to run out of gas in like half an hour. I used to refuel twice a week, and I went racing once and I had to refuel half an hour later. I went through 3.5 gallons of gas. So basically 1 gallon every 10 minutes. So that's basically everything that I need to say. If I say anything else, I'll probably just be repeating myself or explaining it badly. You pretty much have everything you need to know. I've summed up everything in 6 basic tips. So if you just remember these, you should be fine. I made this video because after riding for months and remembering the fact that there are people on 250s who die after a few months of riding, I knew that something about the way people look at motorcycles is completely stupid. There's no way I could get on 1,000 and do what I do if it's that difficult. So I'm passing this knowledge on at the very least so people know more about motorcycles, even if you don't want to get on one and do 200. So these will not only make you fast, they'll make you safer and capable. You can do this if you've just had a few hours on a bike or if you just took the MSF course. But you can do this, and if you follow these rules, it'll be easy for you.